Good afternoon and, well, happy International Women's Day. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I was raised actually really next door, St. Stephen's of Olivet, which is the next village, so I feel very much at home. I'm not going to talk about everything you talked about this morning, but it will be my starting point. It is something politicians say, we're at a crossroads, but actually today we really are. We're at an age of incredible disruption. Everything's going to change within years, not decades. The way we produce, the way we live, the way we relate, the way we meet other people, everything's changing. And this leads to a lot of uncertainty in our society. And this is such an exciting time because this leads to so many people wanting to embrace the future. A more equal future, a better future, but also people who fear the future so much that they believe in an image of the past, a past that was better, and they embrace the image of the past with everything that entails. And I think this is the big ideological confrontation of our day between forces who believe that there's only security in being shielded from the rest of the world in your own community, in looking towards the past as a guide to take you to the future that would be like the past, on the one hand, and people who believe in open societies, in interaction with others as a way forward, and who embrace the idea of a more prosperous future. The interesting thing is that in that confrontation between these ideologies, I still have to meet the first advocate of the vision of a closed society, of a society oriented towards the past and so-called traditional values. I still have to meet the first person who believes in that future, who actually speaks up for women's rights. It is interesting to see that in what we sometimes call the populist world or the reactionary world, etc., family values are very often used. It sounds great. I'm all for family values, but not if they are instrumentalized to put women in their place. So I think the battle for women's rights is right at the heart of the battle for the future of our society, what kind of society we will be. The battle for women's rights is also the most accessible battle in terms of how people mobilize. If you look at the United States, but also parts in Europe, if you look at parts of Asia, there's a lot of pushback, but there's also incredible amounts of mobilization of women of all generations to stand up for women's rights and who deserve a bigger alliance of men joining their fight. All too often, in discussions with colleagues and other politicians, the most talented women, the most powerful women in a discussion would start the discussion by saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not a feminist, but, and I always say, what's wrong with being a feminist? I'm a feminist. I'm proud of saying that I'm a feminist, because I do believe that if you look back in our history, why did women get the right to vote? They could have fought for it for longer, but the powers that be could have stopped it. The women got the right to vote because there were also enough enlightened men to join the fight, so they got the vote. And I think this has not changed in 100 years. You need a coalition of enlightened women and enlightened men to create equality in our society. So that's why I proudly say I am a feminist, and I invite my two sons and all other men I speak to also say that they are feminists. So what are, in this global confrontation, so we all know why people are insecure. It has to do with identity challenges, as we know. It has to do with huge economic challenges. And it has to do with social challenges linked to a new way of communicating, the internet, social media, etc. This creates a lot of uncertainty. And then you see, and you see it also in European nations, politicians of the populist kind who say, we are the ones who speak for the people. Because we are the ones who understand the people, nobody else does. And since we are the ones who speak for the people, what we say is what the people think. And anybody who disagrees with us is an enemy of the people. You've seen it. It happened with Brexit. It happened in quite a number of member states. This idea of so-called enemies of the people is back. And I want to say, if we want to do something about this, it's not just moaning about the people on the other side, from my perspective. We need to do 4 things. I strongly believe in this. First of all, we need to be seen. We need to speak out. We need to be vocal. We need to contradict. We need to show by being present that the people doesn't exist and that there are different views in a society and that every single view has equal rights to be there and to be heard. But if you're not there, if you're not vocal, if you don't show yourselves, if you don't go into the streets, they can still maintain this fallacy that they speak on behalf of all the people because nobody else has heard. The second thing is you need to get organized. This is where I see a difference in my kids' generation and my own generation. Our political awakening was very much linked with organization, getting organized, being a member of a party, etc. My kids don't see that. They have issues, they want them to be tackled, but they don't have this taste for organization. So I would go back to what Willy Brandt always said, positive societal change is created when you create an alliance between generations, between grandparents and grandchildren. The grandparents know how to organize, the grandchildren want to be active. We are, as I said, the ideological confrontation is between people who believe in a closed society, we're only going to be well off if we keep all the others out, and people who believe in an open society, we're going to be better if we are open to others. But the traditional political, ideological times are over. My kids will not be mobilized by an ideology, but they are mobilized by idealism. And one element of idealism that is widely shared by many people is equal treatment. So now this brings me to the third point. So the first point is be vocal. The second point is get organized. The third point is policy. I am absolutely convinced. I think Sky News came out with an analysis yesterday asking the British people. Apparently, a majority of British people think that we've reached the level of equality that we need and we don't need to do more for women's rights. This is apparently the feeling, a majority feeling in British society today. And now, that's not because these are bad people, that's simply because they don't know. So we have to show that there is a pay gap. We have to show that there is a pension gap. We have to show that more than half of women have experience in our society with sexual violence or with harassment. People don't know, but we have to show that. We have to point that out day by day. If I say that in my country, the Netherlands, there is still a pay gap of at least 14%, people first don't believe you, but you can prove it. So you have to show these things. If you see that men have more than 30% more free time than women, just imagine what it means if you have less time to go to the theater, to read a book, to go play tennis or another sport, just because it is culturally more acceptable that you don't just have a job, but also do all the work at home. That does something to a person. It gives you less opportunity to develop. And I'm sure that younger men don't want this, but they just don't see it. I am convinced that many of these things, pay gap, violence, family relations, attitudes in society, they will change if people see them. The problem with equality is that if you don't see inequality for what it is, if you don't see privilege for what it is, if you believe that privilege is the normal state of affairs because that's what God wants or what the nation wants or what the family wants, if you don't see a problem, you'll not fix it. But if you see the problem, if you see that the problem of equality is that it's not there, then I'm sure we will be able to fix it. And sometimes we will have to take tougher measures. I think we need to have tough legislation on women on boards, because it's not happening by itself. And legislation does work. We need to do it. I'm sorry to say, we need to do it. We need to get public authorities and private authorities to have percentages in all brackets of their organization of women participation. We need to do it. And not just women, full participation. If I look at my own organization, we're now really making strides in terms of equality between men and women. We're a long way from being there yet, but we're going forward. But if I look in the Commission at diversity, hardly any diversity. So we have so much still to do. I mean ethnic diversity. We have so much still to do on that front. So policy does matter in all these areas and even more areas. One other area of policy I really want to mention is work-life balance. We launched an initiative, a proposal from the Commission for parental leave. Equal for men and women, not transferable. A lot of reactions, very negative reactions. I saw it in my own country. The reaction was, Commission, butt out, stay out of this. It's not Europe's affair. We need to do it ourselves. And my reaction was, okay, not imposing, but is it a good idea or not? If it's a good idea, do it nationally. If it's a bad idea, leave it. But is it a good idea or not? And this led also to a debate in the Netherlands. And now, for the first time, a government... You know that when we had our 4 kids, I had the right to 2 days of parental leave. 2 days. 1 day to hopefully be present at the birth, and 1 day to go to the municipality to register our child. This is not good. This is not good. This is killing careers. This is not helping us. And this is not making us good fathers. And I see it with the young generation of men. They want to be more father than my generation, and certainly my parents' generation. And we should be able to offer that. And if it doesn't work by itself, we should put it in legislation. And I think parental leave should be equal for both parents and non-transferable. I don't like this idea that you can transfer the father's parental leave to the mother, which is very often happening. Just imagine you have 4 months each parental leave, as we do with our proposal, and you make it transferable, and you have 3 kids. Then you have 3 times 8 months that the mother is out of the workforce. That is, for her career, in comparison to men, that is very bad for her career. And it's also very bad for the dad because he doesn't get to see his child enough. So I strongly believe that these rights should not be transferable within a family. They should be held by men and by women, or by 2 women or by 2 men separately. No other social rights can be transferred. If I'm ill, I have social rights. I can't transfer this to another person. My holidays I can't transfer to another person, etc., etc. And it should be like this in this area as well. And here the world is changing rapidly. And I'm very much excited about this. So I'm excited by all these things because this is a huge opportunity for our times. But we're a long way from having reached the point of no return, which brings me with a 4th point. To make this happen, we need, as I said, people to be aware of this. To make people aware of this, we need to start at the earliest stages of our education. And I think we need to rethink our educational system, also to introduce the concept of equality, not just in teaching what equality is, but also in acting. You know, the one thing that taught me that I preach equality, but I wasn't a person of equality to start with, is that everything I did as a young adult was actually copying the behavior of my parents. So I understand with my kids, the way my wife and I deal with a household is something the kids are watching. And we very carefully make sure that our sons and our daughters are equally involved in the house, in the family, and that we don't sort of have girly things to do and boys things to do. You know, these are things that if you are conscious about them, you can really make societal change. And I think this should be part of our educational system. But at the end of the day, the first point is the most important point. Nothing inspired me more in the last years than the women's marches we've seen. Nothing inspires me more when I see women speak up for their rights, when I see women go to the streets when their rights are threatened. But I also have to insist on men being part of that. We can only get things done if there is an alliance between men and women on this. This is not just a fight for one gender. The fight for equality is important for both genders. It's important for every single human being. It is happening all over the world. And because it is happening all over the world, there is pushback all over the world. And we will be judged by our children, by our daughters, and by our sons. Afterwards, Dad, what did you do when they started to push back? Dad, what did you do to mobilize people so that we do bring equality forward and that we don't allow them to push us backwards? I think this is the challenge I leave with you today. What every single one of us in this room should be asking themselves, what did I do and what will I be doing tomorrow? If we have a good answer for that, we'll get there. I'm an optimist. We'll get there. Equality is our future. Thank you very much for your attention.